Hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the fourth webinar in our new series of online events. My name's Nell Thompson and I'm the Secretary of the Australian Institute of Animal Management, and I'll be helping with the technical side of the webinar today. I've been on the AIM committee since 2013 and I'm also the coordinator of the National Getting to Zero program. The Australian Institute of Animal Management is the national peak body representing local government animal management officers. The AIM committee consists of a wide range of professionals engaged in the various aspects of animal management. AIM seeks to support those engaged in the business of animal management and the function itself by providing training and information, opportunities for networking and collaboration, and by encouraging the use of best practice, policy and practices. AIM understands the significant pressures placed on local government and not-for-profit rescue and rehoming service providers when working in the companion animal management space. We welcome new members and people can join via our website at www.aim.org.au. You may know that each year the AIM committee put together a 3-day workshop consisting of conference-style presentations and practical training sessions. We have, of course, had to cancel the event due to COVID-19 for this year, but wanted to ensure that our valued members still had access to continuing education. So we've worked on putting together a series of webinars for that purpose. So to the agenda for today. Once I hand over to our presenter, there'll be around 60 minutes of presentation and around 15 minutes of question time once the presentation is concluded. The recording of this webinar will be accessible via our website to all members to watch at any time. We're going to ask that everyone mutes themselves during the presentation unless our presenter indicates otherwise. If you have questions, you can start putting them in the chat box and we'll get through as many as we can at the end of the session. If you have very quick questions that relate to your understanding of the content, we will try to get to them during the presentation. If you have more questions or we don't get to yours during the question time, you can send a message to our Facebook page and we'll get to it that way. As always, please excuse any working from home background noises that may filter through. So to our presenter for today. We're very excited to welcome back our international presenter today, and we're super grateful for her generosity with her time, as I'm sure after a long day, she'd much prefer to be sitting on the couch right now. Kristen Hassen is a past National Animal Care and Control Association board member and the most recent Director of Animal Services of Pima Animal Care Center, the municipal shelter in Pima County, Tucson, Arizona. Kristen oversaw animal control and shelter services there. Kristen's areas of expertise include building pet support services to reduce intake, strategic communications for executive leadership in animal management, and creating and implementing best practices and model programs. She's taught students from all over the US and around the world who visit PAC to learn about building model programs in a high intake government animal shelter. This month, Kristen became Director for Human Animal Support Services, a new initiative transforming the role government and non-government agencies play in animal management. Over to you, Kristen.
Thank you so much, Nell, and thank you for having me. Good afternoon, everyone, evening here. Thank you so much for your time today. We're going to talk a little bit about what is happening in shelters across the United States right now, because things have really profoundly shifted since COVID. And a lot of that change was a long time coming. So today I'm going to be focusing on the national effort called Human Animal Support Services. And you'll hear me refer to that as HAS, which is the acronym. And the purpose of HAS is to fundamentally transform how we care for lost, homeless, and abandoned animals in the US. So you can stop me at any time if you have questions. I'll go through some slides, and these slides are just intended to help you better understand the program, because I'm going to be moving quite quickly through the content. So I know some people are visual learners and some people are auditory learners, so we have both. Sorry, hold on one second. Okay. Okay, so human animal support services really started during COVID. And so when COVID hit, what we assumed would happen was that animal shelters would be forced to close their doors and the animals that were inside would be euthanized or just held indefinitely. We didn't think we'd be able to stay open. And so we created an emergency plan to try to get as many animals out of shelters. And once they were out, we decided that we needed to better address the root causes that lead to animals entering shelters in the first place. And that's something that animal welfare just hasn't been very good at historically. So we've learned a few things about animals in the time that we've been doing this work. There are research studies to back all of this up, and I'm happy to provide the citations to you. But we've learned that 90% of people that have an animal value that pet as if it was a family member. And we also know that in the US, and this is true so many other places, the number of people wanting to adopt an animal vastly outnumber the number of animals that need homes. We're just not doing a great job figuring out how to get all those people matched up with shelter animals. Additionally, some early research is showing that 75% of loose or lost dogs are found within less than a mile from their home. And this is really significant information. What it tells us is that we shouldn't be taking dogs into pounds unless we have to, because they're much more likely to get home if they stay in their neighborhood. And that 92% of loose dogs entering the shelter belong to someone. They're not unowned dogs. We're just not good at getting them back to their home. So we know all of that. Yet despite that, dog pounds and animal shelters continue to operate much the same. And in case you haven't heard me speak before, in the US, government shelters or municipal pounds are often also the places where adoption, foster programs, volunteer programs happen. So there are some private shelters, but in many places, the government shelter is the one that's also doing all the things that the nonprofit shelter in Australia would do. So it's all smashed up together. So the problem is that most animal shelters operate on a simple rule. Animals have to be separated from their homes and their communities and their families in order to receive service. An animal can't get help unless it's taken out of its home and community and put into the shelter. And in the US, 6 million animals are still entering shelters each year, with 1.5 million dying. And most of those are savable animals. We're just not able to save them yet. And I just want to point out, I won't stop to tell you too many stories tonight because I do have quite a lot to get through, but every picture you're seeing is taken from one of the human animal support services success stories that have happened over the last just 6 months. So every photo you're seeing is some animal in person that's benefited from the HOS programs. So we believe when we started to meet, we just started to pull together everyone in the movement from all sides. Every shelter who used to fight with another shelter, everyone got in the same virtual room, and we just decided to start talking about problems. And we wanted to create solutions that met all of these criteria. So we wanted to have solutions that were based in the community and what the communities actually wanted. We know from research in countries where dogs are allowed to roam free that mostly what people want is safety, and they want to know that the dogs that are free roaming are healthy. And so what we decided from the beginning is that we would actually go to people that live in the places we serve and ask them, what do they want? We wanted to have viable, affordable alternatives to intake. So instead of an animal coming into the shelter, we wanted to have alternatives to that. And we wanted to have immediate outcome pathways identified to reduce the length of stay. There's some early success with this, which I'll talk about later. But the idea is that no animal spends a day in the shelter in a pound without someone trying to get it out. So animals aren't just sitting in the system, which is a huge problem here. I don't know if it is in Australia, but it's a huge problem. The animals enter the system and they just sit there until someone gets around to helping them get out or move forward or be euthanized, but there isn't a systematic process to move them quickly. And we also wanted to build relationships among animal services, animal shelters, and human services agencies. So those were sort of the 4 starting points we picked. So HOS is a collaborative project. The entire animal welfare industry is involved. And so we set out to create an entirely new way of serving pets and people. We wanted to imagine that we could just start over and say, we designed this system 150 years ago. It is not relevant for the way people feel about animals today. How can we build an entirely new system that respects this knowledge that people do love their animals? Cats, dogs, the people that care for these animals love them. So this is a slide with a lot of words on it, but this is roughly the structure of HAAS. And a lot of what we're going to talk about following this is based on this slide. So this is how it all fits together. First and foremost, the community frames everything, and everything we do is rooted in the communities we serve. But we had some specific elements that we wanted to implement, and these are things that shelters are not doing in their entirety. So the ones in the middle are the big institutional elements. They're the things that need to change if we're going to fundamentally transform the system. We need more government support for animal services. And I've been watching some of Andy Meddick's work on legislating for animal change. And a lot of what we need to do here is actually copy that work and do the same thing here. We have not done that, and we've never had a political party dedicated to animals' needs. And so we need to do a lot more of that legislative work to get more government support for animal shelters. In the US, and this is probably true other places, we've seen a steady increase in budgets for parks and recreation, for wastewater management, for all kinds of government services. We have not seen that same budget increase over the last 2 decades in animal services. So animal services budgets are stagnant, and that's a problem. We need to do much more research and data. There is sadly little research to base any decisions about animal sheltering on. It's been a really under-researched field. And we need to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion much more than we do now. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But if you've been following US news, there have been protests and uprising against racial injustice and the murder of Black people happening at the hands of police. So it's sort of brought up issues around diversity and equity and inclusion in animal welfare. Animal welfare here tends to be primarily white, middle and upper class women working in the upper echelons and volunteering. And then finally, innovation. And innovation is using all the technology that we have at our fingertips that animal shelters have never really taken advantage of. So the elements on the outside, I'm going to talk more about each of those, but those are the things that all shelters can do now. So you don't have to wait for this giant interagency collaboration for those that we need for those big four. You can start the ones on the outside now. And the ones on the outside are the ones that anyone can start in any animal shelter today that will help reduce intake and reduce length of stay. So this is the shelter that I just came from. I've been running government shelters for the last 8 years. And we started piloting the HAAS programs about 2 years ago. So in 2019, we were able to keep 4,500 animals with their families and not have them be surrendered to the shelter. So that was a huge number. And that was all through just helping people. We sent 5,300 animals to foster homes each year. We reduced intake by 30% this year. And we serve 60,000 animals in our community. We just hit 1.5 million meals served to animals in Tucson, which is a relatively small town, but people really need that food now with the impacts of COVID. And we reduced the length of stay in shelter to 2.8 days for animals in the intake to placement program, which I'll talk more about, and achieved a 93% live release rate. And that's with an intake of about 20,000 animals. So the HAAS programs work. Okay, the next few slides are going to be kind of, I'm not going to go through them in great detail because they're very focused on the structure of the project in the US. But I just want to give you a sense of the scale. It's huge. So the project up here, you'll see Austin Pets Alive is a parent organization, but American Pets Alive, which is a subsidiary of Austin Pets Alive, is really overseeing this work. And right here, we have diversity, equity, and inclusion in an advisory role at the very top. Down here, we have the elements. Over here, we have 38 pilot shelters. These are animal shelters that have agreed to test out all of our new programs so we can see if they work. And then over here, we have the working groups. And these working groups are trying to solve the long-standing tough problems of animal welfare that have prevented change. So there are things like community engagement, community cats, rehoming animals without putting them in a kennel, data and research. So these working groups are all aiming to solve these problems. And here's a map of the shelters in the US that are participating. So these are the tier 1 and tier 2 shelters. And here's where I am, right here in the heart of Texas. And so we have several shelters in Texas. But you'll see in the US, the high kill shelters are all this bottom part of the country, and that's because it's warmer here and animals are breeding more prolifically and more often. So having these shelters in these higher kill areas is really impactful for us. So we think that what we can do with Haas is different than what we've done with all of our life-saving app programs in the past. We think we can prevent the needless separation of animals from people by helping people keep their animals even when they're struggling. We think that we can stop institutionalizing cats and dogs when we have other alternatives. There's so many other ways to care for cats and dogs other than putting them in a shelter. And we can stop the death that's associated with overcrowding in shelters and lack of resources. And we can have a more equal landscape so that animals in one place are served just as well as animals in another. And that really isn't true. Currently, animals in high density, high poverty areas are much more likely to lose their lives in shelters. So these are just some of the organizations participating. This may or may not be meaningful to you, but I wanted to share this because it is a large project. These are some of the largest animal shelters in the country. In total, the intake into these shelters represents nearly 1 million animals a year. So these are big shelters, big challenges, and they're shelters that really need to have fewer animals coming in. And then we also have all of these national organizations. I don't know why we're going so fast. Okay. We have all these national organizations part of the project. And what's cool about that is we have never in the US had everyone collaborate. Everyone is at the table for this project. There's no one not collaborating on it. And so we've all come together to make this happen, and it's working. This is the leadership of the project. So we have Diaz, who you see on the left, he runs a homeless shelter for teenagers. And Chaitanya on the right on the far right, comes out of international farm animal management, humane work. And then the 4 of us in the middle all come out of different areas in animal welfare. Lisa runs the Washington, DC, the US Capitol shelter. Gina is a lost and found guru. She's the best. She knows more about lost and found animals than anybody in the country. Dr. Jefferson leads the whole thing, and then I work for Dr. Jefferson. And DEI, as I mentioned, is a really critical piece. There has been a real lack of representation of people of color in animal welfare historically. And so we are bringing together a really diverse group of leaders to help inform this project. And these are some of those people. So we have some tactics that we are trying to follow in order to change the system, because the system as is set up for transactional intake. It's set up, an animal comes in, the system takes it. And so that's really what we're trying to change. So when we bring everyone together, we're trying to create one voice for change. We want everyone to be in agreement on what needs to shift. And we're creating programs that help decentralize operations. What does that mean? It means that no longer will animals just come into the pound or come into the shelter. They'll be served wherever they live. So you can imagine that in a neighborhood where there's a lot of animal intake, one person will be selected who lives in that neighborhood into a paid position where they can actually help people get animals home in their neighborhood. That person knows they can go to that house, They can say, I found a lost dog, and that person's going to be right there to help them. So things like that are a really different way of going about what we do. It also means providing services in places that have historically high intake. And so we also are going to help organizations learn what's really most important to their constituents. Is having every single cat rounded up and taken out of the community important? Or is it important that cats are not in ecologically sensitive areas? We need to be asking constituents and communities questions like that. So these are some of the other strategies, but we're trying to create, it's sort of like if you imagine social work. Social work is a very developed field here, and you know, we have standardized processes nationally for dealing with human problems. Everything from homelessness to hoarding to child welfare issues. We have national standards, and we also have academic programs that help standardize this stuff. We have nothing like that for animal welfare. Every organization does things completely differently. There's no consistency. Most people can't tell you why they do something beyond that's the way we've always done it. But it's maddening to try to study things or to make change when no one's on the same page. So we really want to create industry standards with data standards. We want to create a dictionary of terms, a glossary of terms, so that everyone understands what I mean when I say owner surrender, or I say stray, or I say feral. We use these terms. We don't even know what we mean. Many of us mean different things when we say them. So we really want to standardize the industry. And finally, we are conducting several research projects. One of the ones that I'm most excited about is supply and demand. So we don't know why. There's the whole northern United States. In many places, there are not enough animals. And this is true. I know this is true some places in Australia too. And so people are talking about selectively breeding animals. Well, that is fine, except in other parts of the US, there are thousands and thousands of animals dying for lack of space. There's nothing wrong with the animals. There's nowhere to put them, and there's too many. So one of the research projects we're focusing on is how to get the supply and demand leveled out so that we don't have an excess supply in some places and an excess demand in some places, which hopefully will even things out and mean that animals aren't dying for space anywhere. So this is all, it sounds really great, it's pretty words, but what does it mean? Here's our goals. They're very simple. There's 4 metrics that we're trying to achieve. First metric is that we want to reduce municipal shelter intake by 50%. Oh gosh. By up to 50%. So reduce the number of animals coming into shelters by up to 50%. Secondly, we want to reduce the number of animals living in a shelter or a pound at any given time by 50%. So only half as many animals living in shelter. Third, we want to increase the number of pets going to foster by 100%. Foster programs could be so much bigger, and they're the best kept secret in many places because they're very inexpensive. They're very easy to operate, and they're so much more humane for animals and people. And lastly, we want to increase the number of lost pets getting home by at least 25%. And if you're a government official, this all equals up to cost savings in care and feeding, et cetera. But it doesn't mean that we can just slash animal services budgets. That's not the point. The point is actually to take that money that you're spending to feed animals, clean their kennels, provide medical care, and actually reallocate that funding to provide support in the community. You can take, for us, it costs about $400 to take in an animal. If we have the ability to help people, it only costs us about $150 to help them keep their pet. So it's much less expensive, and we can help more people. So the goal is better constituent service, better service to the public, and fewer animals being institutionalized. So just a couple of early results. At PAC, we were able to keep 50% of people that wanted to surrender their pets. We were able to keep them with their families. And we were able to reduce the in-shelter length of stay to 2.84 days, which was significant. Our normal length of stay is 10 days. And at Cabot Animal Support Services, Cabot is a poor rural shelter. They have 6 employees and 3,000 animals coming in every year. They really struggle. And they started a program called First 48, and they've had 87% of lost dogs get home within the first 42 hours when they're held on 48 hours when they're held in the community. So what is this program? Basically what it is they're asking people to hold found animals for just 48 hours and try to get them home. And if they don't get them home in that first 48 hours, they'll take them. But people love to help that way. We just never ask them. And they've seen a decrease of 89% in intake. So they've seen a vast decrease. However, some of that's attributed to COVID as well. So this has been a busy year. We brought together, now we have 600 people working on the project. It's almost entirely volunteers. Almost everyone working on this project is a volunteer, but they're all experts in animal welfare. They come from animal shelters, veterinary medicine. They come from national organizations, they come from private corporations, but they're all industry experts and they're all working together on this project. So we have had more than 400 hours of meetings since we started and have generated the tools that are hopefully going to help you implement some of these programs if you want to. We meet every Monday and Friday. I wish this was at a time that we could get Australian folks to come, but these are all recorded and they are invaluable. What we do is we bring together 150 to 200, sometimes up to 500 animal welfare industry experts together, and we just all talk on a big call. We have short presentations, discussions about hard topics. And if you're not doing this already, it is a great idea to get everyone together. We do it twice a week and it's exhausting. I run most of them, but we have gotten so many people engaged and excited, and we're just talking through problems. So we do that every single week. Okay, so I'm going to skip through a bit of this. The goal for us is that this year coming up, what we're going to be able to offer to you and to anyone that wants them are the toolkit. And the toolkit will be free, accessible by any of our HOS partner organizations. And those are just organizations that are trying to learn the HOS programs. There's no secret entry fee or anything like that. We just want as many people as possible to get to try these. And so in early 2021, we're going to launch our toolkit, and that's going to have quick explanations of how to implement all the elements that I shared with you in that picture, and I'm going to talk more about in a minute. And it's going to have links to all kinds of resources, information, and research that supports each of them. So that's what's coming. And in 2022, we'll have completed some of our early research. And in 2023, we hope to expand this nationally and internationally beyond what we're even doing now. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the elements. So I wanted to get through all of that, and I realize it's a little bit heavy, but it sets the stage for why people are so excited about this project. And the reason is because it's based in very basic elements or programs or ideas. And so we came up with these ideas just from things we know have worked in shelters before to help reduce intake. So I'm going to walk through each one, but all the information about these is on the website. And if you haven't visited the website, it's humananimalservices.org. The website has all of this information. So if you feel like I'm going too quickly or you're missing something, you can find all of the information I'm going to share there. And that's also where the toolkit will be. But the elements are designed to do everything I said, to meet those metrics we really want to meet. So the institutional elements are the ones that I talked about initially. These are the 4 elements that are kind of the big picture pieces. They're the ones that we have to get those right, and they're going to involve animal shelters, but they're also going to involve other agencies like the government or private corporations or others that we need to bring in, or technology firms. So the first one is, so we've kind of gone through these. So I'm going to get to the organizational elements. So I talked about the institutional ones earlier, so I'm not going to cover that ground again, but they're government, diversity, equity, and inclusion, innovation, and data and research. So those 4 will involve other organizations. But the 12 I'm going to talk about next are the ones that you can start anytime. And we're going to give you the tools to do that. So you'll see here, this is an animal control unit. And you'll see that things have really changed for how animal control presents itself. Our animal control officers now, they're wearing pretty plain polo shirts. They go out in the community, and the primary thing they're doing is helping people. They do much less punitive work or writing citations and much more just helping people who need them. So this is kind of the new face of animal control. And we found we have much lower recidivism. We have fewer bites. We have fewer stray animals when our officers just start helping people and stop punishing them. And that maybe doesn't make common sense, but it's true. And it's been true. So we now have the safest community that we've ever had. And I'm speaking about my last shelter. But we also have people that trust our animal control and look to them for help. So the first element is lost and found. The way that typically an animal comes into the pound is that it'll get lost and someone will drive it in, or an animal control officer will pick it up and it'll come in. And if no one comes looking for it, it's not likely to ever get home. And this is, we know with cats that it's very unlikely people will come looking for them, at least not for a couple of weeks, because many people are used to their cats wandering around and don't even know that they're lost. And unfortunately, for so many animals, by the time people do come looking for them, it's too late. That animal's either been adopted or, in an even worse case, has been euthanized. And so we can do a lot better with lost and found. So the lost and found program that we're building basically is a proactive approach to getting animals home. So first, we ask people to hold animals for up to 72 hours. We don't, and if somebody finds a stray dog and that first stray dog is friendly and it's healthy, or they find a stray cat and it's friendly and it's healthy, and it's not in danger, we say, can you hold this animal for up to 72 hours? And about half of people say, yes, I will. Some people say, no way. And we say, okay, you bring it to the shelter. But a lot of people will help. And when they do that, they're very likely to help get that animal home, as you saw in the data I shared earlier. And so that becomes kind of the foundation for everything we do with Lost and Found. We empower people and ask them to help. And when we pick up an animal, when our officers pick up an animal, the first thing they do is they pick up their microchip scanner. They all have one on their truck. They scan that animal for a microchip. They look for a license. They look for any identification, whether it's a cat or a dog. If they find the identification, they try to contact that person before they bring the animal to the shelter. And so they return the animal in the field without it ever being impounded. This is more cost effective for the animal shelter because you're not impounding the animal, and it avoids the punitive citation of having your animal impounded. And this works great. We're able to get thousands of animals home this way. They never have to come into the shelter, which is really beneficial and better for the animals. So that's been a hugely important strategy. And the next one is keeping families together. So keeping families together means that we're going to do everything we can to keep animals out of the organization. We're going to do everything we can to not have them come in. And this means having a call center, being able to offer people support, answer their questions. At our call center, we get about 8,000 calls a month, and that's in a community of only 1 million people. People really want help with their animals. They have behavioral problems, or they don't know where to get their animal spayed or neutered, or they need food. And so what we do is we help them keep their animal if they're looking at surrendering. So the Keeping Families Together program says that if somebody comes to us and has to give up an animal, we're going to do everything we can to try to have them keep that animal, knowing that sometimes we won't be successful. So some of the things that we do include paying pet deposits for rent. Again, cheaper than intaking the animal. We also provide medical care, both emergency and routine. Again, we would have to do it if the animal were impounded anyway, so we just do it, get it back to the owner. We provide food and supplies. We have a giant food distribution because people are really struggling with job loss right now. And we also provide behavior support. A lot of people need help getting their animal trained if they're going to keep it. And we also provide free spay, neuter, and vaccines and free microchipping for people. So all of this costs us less and it keeps more animals in their home. So the Keeping Families Together program does anything you can within your means to help keep animals out. And it's been really, really successful everywhere it's been piloted. People really need the support and want it, and it helps keep animals in their homes. The next one is self-rehoming. So there's 2 softwares available now, and I don't know if they're available in Australia yet. One is called Home to Home and one is called Rehome. And what they do is they allow people to rehome their animal outside of the shelter. So if someone needs to give up a pet, they allow people to do that on their own. But this program goes far beyond using a shelter software system. It basically says that if someone needs to give up an animal, we're going to try to have them rehome that animal themselves, and we're going to help them along the way. So we may give them a sample adoption application. We may give them we may help with a meet and greet. So we may help the old owner meet the new owner. We'll facilitate it, but we don't impound the animal. And what we've found is that owners are way better at adoption counseling than shelters are. So this is another way to keep animals out of the shelter, but still serve them. Intake to placement. This program, I think, is probably the most critical among all of the things that we're doing. This program says that you can have outcome pathways identified before an animal ever comes in. So this kitty was found with an injured eye, really skinny, was really friendly, but had been outdoors. We saw the cat, we had a video of it, we knew it was sick. We had a foster waiting to get the cat. So as soon as that cat entered the shelter, it had a foster waiting there. We got it some medical care and it left right away. This program is particularly important with cats because once cats get into a shelter, they're often so afraid that they completely shut down and you have no idea what their personality is like. Unfortunately, thousands, if not millions of cats die when they go into shelters, and people think that they're feral or they're unfriendly when they're really just afraid. And so this kind of program can be truly life-saving for cats. And the way you do it is you just recruit fosters and rescue partners ahead of time, and you keep a list. So all we do is we have a list of people waiting to foster and what kinds of animals they'll foster. And then as animals start to come in, we have an entire person, and all they do is match up that animal with that foster home, rescue placement, or adoptive home. And so the animal comes in, it gets whatever medical care it needs, and it leaves within hours or days. This could just totally transform the way we do everything. If we would really go all in, if you do nothing else and you decide you want to shorten your length of stay with this program, this could have a major impact on shelters because animals will spend so much less time. We won't see the behavioral and medical decline that we see in shelters. But that doesn't mean shelters are ever going to go away. Animals can't speak, and so we can't get rid of shelter because lost animals, hurt animals, animals that are posing a public safety threat will always need somewhere to go. But the role of the shelter becomes more like an emergency room and a triage center and a quick stopping point for an animal. And this goes for a pound or a private animal shelter that we no longer consider them places where animals live. We just consider them a very short-term stopping point. And again, this goes back to taking all that budget you're spending on caring for those animals in shelter and being able to reallocate it into things that help the community solve the root problems, the root causes of why animals are entering shelters. So field services and public safety, this is animal control. This still plays a critical role in the Haas model. Field services is just as important as ever, but it's very, very different. Field services is all about helping address root causes, helping people get dog houses or cat enclosures, helping them get food for their animals or medical care when they need it, even helping people repair their fences so that their animals, so that their dogs stop roaming stray. These solutions, I did an interview with a major national publication, and I told this reporter that our officers go out and actually build and repair fences for people. And he kind of paused and he said, "Do you think that's really realistic?" But when you calculate the amount of money to do that and the number of staff hours to go and buy supplies and repair or build someone a fence, it's actually much lower. Sometimes it's a quarter of the time and resources you'd spend if that animal came in. And so that's kind of how we think, is like, if we can do something out in the field, our officers are that first line of defense. Why is this important? Because when you do this approach, it frees up your officers to handle the real cruelty and neglect cases, the very dangerous dogs that are sometimes roaming, the animals that are in immediate danger. When you kind of stop having officers write citations for a licensing violation or a stray roaming dog that's friendly and has never been loose, when you kind of like take that work off their plate somewhat, they have more time to deal with the more serious concerns the public has. So this all goes back to asking communities what's important. Is it important to you that every stray animal has a citation or a ticket written and they get punished? Or is it important that there are no dangerous dogs roaming on your streets? And the vast majority of people we're finding are saying that public safety, health of animals are the most important factors. So foster is key. Again, still many municipal shelters are not investing in foster, and it just doesn't make business sense not to invest in foster. Even if you are running just a straightforward government animal shelter, foster programs are inexpensive, they're humane, and they are safe. One of the most dangerous things we do is lock animals in cages by themselves for long amounts of time. We actually increase the bites in shelter by doing that. And so foster can make your organization safer, and can also get more animals out, again, reducing all of the number of animals that are living in the shelter. Foster is easy to start. Successful programs are sending anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 animals to foster in a year, with the idea that any animal should be eligible to go to foster while it's waiting. I give whole presentations on this, so I'm barely scratching the surface today, but foster should be the way that we house most animals. Instead, it's still a very unique program in most places. Telehelp is one that we haven't really pursued until COVID, but boy, has it made a difference. This little dog was bit by a rattlesnake and needed immediate help. But so telehelp, we do telehealth appointments now. So our veterinary appointments are done through telehealth when the animal has a foster or an owner. That means the owner is just on a screen with the veterinarian on the other side. We also use teleservice for when people find an animal, they can just text in a picture and a description and the location, and that can automatically get uploaded into a found report, making it quicker and easier. We need to move most animal services communications to text and email chat. Those are the platforms that everyone else in the world is using. Animal welfare has just been very slow to adopt those, but we all need to be thinking about texting because it's such a faster way for people to communicate, and it's much less expensive. If somebody can just text you information and it can get uploaded into a found report for an animal, it's cheaper and it's faster for the organization. So there are a million remote technologies and they're not that expensive. We've investigated remote for everything, and it's actually probably all the technology we would want in a year is less than the cost of one staff person. So it's not expensive to implement these. It just takes some time in learning about how to use them. So I'm almost through the elements, hopefully. I haven't numbed your brain yet. So I'm almost done with talking about them, but I've got a couple more to talk about. Case management is kind of at the heart of the whole project. And case management is very simply the idea that we no longer think of animals as their breed or their species or their age. We no longer say, oh, it's another litter of kittens. Case management means we consider every animal and every person as an individual with an individual set of needs. And we try to understand the individual set of needs of that animal and if there's a person, the person that's attached to that animal. So for instance, one person may show up at your organization with a 15-year-old dog that they can no longer keep. And that person is losing their home. They're going into a retirement medical facility where they can't have animals, and they have cancer and they're not going to get well. That animal needs to come into your shelter because that person has nowhere else to take their animal. However, you may have another person come to surrender their 15-year-old dog, and you find out that they're surrendering it because the dog has a skin condition they can't afford to treat. And you can treat that skin condition or refer them to a service and not take in that animal. But if you're doing things the old way, you would never know which was which. You would never know which animal really needed to come in and which didn't. Same thing for cats. Someone may find a friendly cat who has a wound on its body. They may find that cat and they may bring it to the pound or the shelter, and one person might say, my family already fell in love with this cat. We'll do whatever it takes to get him well. Can we just file a report, let you know we've took him and take him? Another family may say, I love this cat. We found this cat. We can't keep it. We just want you all to take it. Those two cats might look identical. They might be almost the same story, but one cat has an option in the community and one cat doesn't. But we never ask people. We never ask them, can you help? We just say, yep, we'll take it. No questions asked. And by doing that, we're not just not doing our jobs very well and unwisely using resources. We're actually not taking advantage of the good spirit of people that really want to help. We're not giving our communities a chance to help. And that's something that we really need to change. So when I say case management is at the heart of this project, that's what I mean. Partnerships are so important because animal shelters can't do all of the work themselves. And we've historically operated in our own little silo. So if you can partner with your human health services agency, or you can partner with code enforcement who kicks people out of their homes for code violations. I don't know if that happens in Australia. It happens here all the time. If you can partner with them, you can help people keep their animals. So partnerships are a huge part of HOS because we want to connect people to all the services they can access to help them be successful pet owners. And this entire project needs to be driven by the community and by volunteers. And so in shelters that do permit volunteers, they have a relatively restricted set of roles. They can maybe walk an animal, they can pet a cat, they can help with an adoption, they can do dishes. But the HOS project expands everything volunteers can do. So now under HOS, volunteers can provide community outreach, like these people here are providing pet food to people experiencing homelessness. Volunteers can follow up on adoptions and call people and say, how's your animal doing? Volunteers can help in the intake lobby. And this is a real change. In the intake area, or admissions, as some people call it, volunteers can actually help provide counseling and support for people so that if they can keep their pet, we can help them. Volunteers can also help get stray animals home. If someone comes in with a stray and they want help trying to get the animal home, volunteers can help with that. They can make posters. They can help with posting on social media, et cetera. So this vastly expands what volunteers can do, and they love it. They love having opportunities to help, especially during COVID when traditional volunteering isn't always possible for people. Okay, so I think that's the basic overview of Haas, that's what we're trying to accomplish. And we feel hopeful because we feel like COVID has finally brought us to this place where we have to do things differently. I don't know if any of you ever went into an animal shelter or a dog pound when you were a little kid, but I did. And I remember the feeling that I had was deep sadness. I was only a little girl, maybe 5 or 6, but I didn't know why all those animals were there. It didn't make sense to me. And I didn't understand why they were all crying and looking hopefully at me. And as children, we know that taking animals that are fundamentally social creatures, they love animals of their own species, they sometimes love animals of other species, and they love people. Taking them and isolating them in the shelter should be the last resort. It always needs to be an option because of public safety and medical care, but it should be the last option after we've pursued other things, because sheltering in the way that we've done it for the last 150 years, it doesn't match up with how people feel about animals today. People love animals as family, and so we should be providing a whole new set of services that treat animals as beloved family members, not as a nuisance, not as something to be gotten rid of. And by doing that, we help create that next generation of children that they're going to be foster carers. They're going to be volunteers. They're going to be helping keep animals out of the shelter. They're going to know that when they find a stray animal, their family can hold on to it for 2 days and can help go knock on doors and try to get it home. We have taught our communities, we've taught the public, bring every animal into the shelter. And what Haas says is, let's not do that anymore. Let's tell people different and new ways they can help be part of the solution. And what we're finding is more often than not, people love having those opportunities. So it's just up to us to give them that chance and to give them the ability to help. And that's really what we can hope. And we believe Haas is going to be an international endeavor. We have people now from 7 different nations who are in some way part of this project, because the problems in so many places are strikingly similar. And so we plan to just keep expanding and keep offering support. Haas is a nonprofit organization. We've gotten a lot of grant support, which we're really grateful for. It's what keeps us going. But our goal is to be, in the next 3 to 6 months, providing all the tools, resources, and research that we can get you, just so that we can expand this and hopefully really change animal shelters forever and ever, so that when we're all long and gone, the people working in these organizations are doing profoundly different work, but even more meaningful work than we're doing now. So I just want to, in closing, say that I have the greatest respect for those of us who've grown up in the animal sheltering field. I started in 1999. And my job was to euthanize animals. And I know we've come so far as a field, but almost everything we do is reactive. It's reacting to animals coming into the system. And my hope is that over the next 3 to 5 years, we switch that to a more proactive approach, so that animals that don't need to enter the system don't have to. And that will only make the stuff that we're doing on the other end to help those animals, it will only make it better, and it will only result in healthier communities where pets and people both have fundamental value. Thank you.
Kristen, I think there's more than one mind blown out in the audience there, and I know there'll be more when people get to watch this recording. But that was an incredible presentation, and it really is such a ridiculously inspiring concept, and all of the activities, they make so much sense. And to have the support of you guys and to make it an international venture is really exciting for all of us over here. So we're very, very grateful for that. And really the concept that it's all based on is already happening in Australia with organisations such as AMREC. That is essentially how AMREC operates in Indigenous communities. So if we can, there's no reason why we can't expand that out to mainstream communities. I mean, people are people, and they want to be dealt with respect and, support, rather than, alternative sort of enforcements and things like that. So I think we could learn a lot from what's already happening here in Australia and that has been working so well in community, and to see what you guys are doing over there. So I'd like to open it up to questions if there are any. I think people are probably a bit blown away, but if you've got a question, pop it in the Q&A or in the chat. Um, Now's the time. We've got Kristen for another couple of minutes. I know that things are different here in Australia in terms of what local government can do, particularly around volunteers. But I also think that there is opportunity for change there, because a lot of it is based around insurance here. So um, I think that there's no reason why we can't be looking at it and then looking to change and remove the barriers that are currently in our way. Once they're identified, rather than us just saying, okay, well, there's a barrier there, let's not do that. Let's look at dismantling that, or removing it, changing it, because if it would improve, if the alternative improves the situation, then there's no reason not to. It's just a historical event has caused that barrier to be in place, but doesn't mean that it's relevant now. So um, all of these things we can change if we want to, and if we put enough effort in, and if we work together, I think is really the big takeaway from all of the Huss work.
Yeah.
Never before has it been seen that all of those groups, have sat around that virtual table as you described twice a week. And that's incredibly powerful. And it's not to say that all of those groups agree on everything,
No.
that they're doing, but it doesn't matter, because you find the things that you can agree on. And it takes all of the groups to make progress in this area, because everyone has their areas of expertise, everyone has different resources to bring to the table. So we need to be all working together to do that, to make it happen. And the benefits will be immense for everybody. So if there aren't any questions, I'm not seeing anything popping up, but we're incredibly grateful for your time this evening. Thank you so much. I know you guys are really working under challenging conditions over there. Can't even imagine what you're going through with COVID, etc.
Yeah, the COVID crisis is terrifying here, and most of my family has COVID currently. They're on day. My two sisters and my nieces and nephews are on day 5, but it's terrifying. We have 200,000 new cases a day, and it's really impacting. I mean, personally, this is the most impacted I've been, and hearing my family on the phone trying to gasp for breath and talk is really scary, but no one is taking it. I mean, not no one, half of the country isn't taking it seriously. So we have had 200,000 new cases a day here for the last week. And it's really impacting the shelters, because we're getting animals of people who are deceased from COVID or who've been put into long-term hospital care. So we're really concerned about that. And I can't imagine this could get any worse, but it's getting worse by the day. So we look to places like you all for how one could do it better and not see your friends and loved ones sick and potentially dying, because it's really terrifying. But a lot of what Haas is, a lot of what we've done this last 6 months is to try to keep people with their pets while they've been treated for COVID, because we know that animals are so healing. And I don't know about you, but my dogs wouldn't leave my side if I was sick. So we're doing a lot of work to keep animals with their people during COVID as well.
Yeah, it's really important stuff. And as much as, I mean, the effects obviously of COVID are devastating over there, but you can't help but look at the positives that have come out of it, because perhaps Huss may never have been born formally, if all of this hadn't happened. So, I really feel for you guys. We hate watching what's happening over there, and best of luck for your family, and we're rooting for you all. We've had a comment come through. Very excited to hear about this program. Look forward to watching this happen. And I think that speaks for all of us. We're keenly watching and really keen to be involved. So Yeah, thank you so much for everything that you do. Thank you for your
Yeah,
time.
and please, you feel free to share my email. But if you don't get me via email, it's because we have weird email stuff back and forth between the US and Australia. So I'm on Facebook as well. So find me on Facebook, please, and friend me. I love to watch what you all are doing in Australia too.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening. Thanks everybody for attending. Don't forget to register for next month's webinar. The details will be up hopefully next week. We're having a bit of a research update. So companion animal management and research that's happening in Australia. We're going to have a look at what's happening there. So thanks very much, everybody, for attending, for taking the time, and we look forward to speaking with you all soon.
Thank you.